In this video, I'll show you how to set up a MySQL database so that you can do your database assignment. So the first thing you want to do, we can use either two of these links. There's three steps. Step one is to create a database. Step two is to create a user to access that database. And step three is to give the user permission to access the database you created. So you can do that all individually on this link, or this is a little wizard that will walk you through all three steps. So we'll go through that wizard. Now you probably want to name the database after what you might want your project to be. Maybe I'll create a blog. And if you notice, your database name is always going to have your IS3 username underscore in front of it. And that's to make sure that no two users create the same database or a database with the same name. So go ahead and click the next step, and that'll create a database. So now step two, we need to create a user. You can name the user the same thing as your database. I'm just going to name it blog user just so you can see where the different fields are, because you have your database name and you have your database user. It is okay that they're named the same thing. And then for a password, I recommend that you use this password generator. So go ahead and generate a password, and just go ahead and copy and paste your password into your code somewhere. Put it in a comment. And you want to use a pretty strong password so nobody can guess it. So, and you're just going to copy and paste it in your code. It's going to be in your code anyway, so there's no reason to use a different password or one that you know. You obviously don't want to use the password of your email or something else really important, or even your IS3 password, because if someone got a hold of that, they could attack you, whereas this is just a password for your database. And you can go ahead and click that and say use password. And then once you have that there, you can go ahead and click this password or this create user. So now we can see we have a user and our database. Just noting once again, they're both preceded by my IS3 user name with an underscore. That way, no two users will can ever create the same database name or the same database username. And finally, we just need to click this box to grant all privileges. So that allows us to create tables and everything else that we might want to create with on this database. So then you go ahead and say make changes, and it finally says that the user was added to this database. Now we can go here and return to MySQL databases. Again, you can do all three steps on this page. So this is the first link that I showed you that we didn't, that's not the wizard link, but the first link. And you can see that you have your databases. You can modify your databases. Here is my database. I can see that I have this user. If I want to see his permissions, I could see, oh, there's all of his permissions. And then, of course, I can rename my database or delete it. And I can also create another user. I can add that user to a database. So you can do all those steps here. And the most important thing that you want to do is if you misplace or lose your password, here's where you can change it. If your database isn't working, if you're logging in, it's not allowing you to do that. You just want to check, one, that you have the right database name, two, the right database username, and then three, that you have the right password. So if you're not sure about the password, go ahead and change it to something else, and then change the password in your code where you're going to log in, and hopefully you'll have your database connection all set up. So sorry to be a little bit repetitive. I just want to make sure everybody can clearly see the steps to debug if their database connection does not work. So step one, go to your main cPanel page and click on MySQL databases. Step two, verify that you have the right database name and the right database username. And then step three, check to make sure that the user has all privileges on the database. And then if all of that seems right and you've double checked in your code that you're using these right names and that this guy has all privileges, finally you can change the password of your database user to as a new password, and make sure you copy that code into, or that password into your code. in the right spot where you put your password to make sure the database connection works. Now the database video does show you how to create your users table, but I just want to give you a little update on how it looks in the new user interface. Now you should be able to figure it out from the other video, but just to make sure, because things do happen a little bit differently, I just want to kind of refresh that table with the new updated version of PHP MyAdmin that will allow you to create your database table. So when you do that, you can see all of your databases here, and you can see the new one that you have created. And go ahead and you want to create a table, and we're going to use users as the name. Notice it's all lowercase, and I put an S on the end because it stores more than one user. If you use a different name, then you have to use a different name in your code. So make sure you match that up. And we are going to have 4 columns here. So then we can go ahead and click go. And we can put our 4 columns here. So we're going to have an ID field, a name field, an email, and a hashed password field. So if you want to store more information about the user, you could go ahead and up here add another column to the end to be able to store more information, like maybe their gender, their age, their birth date. But for the video, it's just going to have you store these 4 fields. Now this is called hash password because we don't want to store passwords in plain text. Now all of the ID field will be an integer or a number, and the rest of these are going to be strings, and varchar is how you store a string in a database. And the hash password only needs a length of 40 characters because we're going to use SHA-1 to hash up the passwords, and that always produces a string of exactly 40 characters. And finally, we want to make sure that we have an index on our table, so we're going to make this a primary key here. And we also don't need any negative IDs. All IDs are positive, so we'll make it unsigned. And we'll do the auto increment. Now when you go down here, you'll see the save button. And I guess these varchars do want names, so you can just say 255, and that's, I think, the longest string that you can store with a varchar. And then you can click save. And now it went ahead and saved our table. So from here, if you ever want to check what's in the database, you can go ahead and click on this user. You can browse. Right now I don't have any rows, but if I had data, I'd be able to see data here. And you can view the structure that we created as well. Now, another thing with the database video is the MySQL library that is used in that database video is no longer supported in the current version of PHP, so it won't work. So this is the new way to connect to a database, which is pretty almost the same. But first, we're going to use the MySQL library, and you can search on the web for any documentation on this. So to connect to your database, we're going to connect to localhost, and that's because our PHP code is running on the IS3 machine, and our database server is running on the database machine, so they're on the same machine. And localhost just says, connect to the database running on the same machine as me. And then here is your username right here, and here is where you put in your password. And then finally, where you put in your database name right here. And in the video, they do create a connectDB function, but the connectDB does not return anything. We do now need to return this connection right here. And then now in our code, now I believe this function might be declared in one file, but you could copy and paste in the top of the file if you want. In our code, we do need to save that DB variable when we call connectDB. And then when we run our queries, the first parameter is the DB character right there. And the second parameter is our SQL statement. So if you're watching this before you've gotten to the database video, you might want to watch the database video and then come back to this video and start watching how to do it with the new library. And you can see here, this is the inserting a new user into the database. And we get their name, their email, and their password, and the SHA-1 hashes up their password. And this executes the query on our database. And if everything works, we shouldn't get any error messages saying we didn't connect to the database. Now I've created a simple form to test my database connection. It just asks for an email, a name, and a password. And it submits to this dbintro.php, and that's the same file right here that has my SQL statement that's going to insert in a new user. So here's that form. So we'll put in an email like, say, Bob, and this is Bob and his password. And click Submit. And we could see the SQL statement that ran right here. And it says, you're signed up, I got no errors. Now back within PHP My Admin, if I click on my users table right here, and if you notice, or you click on this browse link, you notice we see that Bob is, sure enough, has been inserted into the database. Now his email is blank, so I probably need to debug that, but that's where you can see the data. It's probably blank because my form doesn't have the right email, but all of that is in the database video. Now that connect to the database is your connection to the database is going to happen on several pages. So you might want to pull that function into a different PHP page like a func.php and require that. But then we would create our connection by calling that function. This time instead of DB, I'm calling it CON. But you can call that whatever you want. That's just the first parameter to this function. You can see that I'm selecting all the users right here, and we're checking for any errors. And then you can see down here, I am printing out the number of rows that are in my database, and I can do this fetch associative, and we can see the data, and notice my row is equal to that, and we can see the data. So that's how you use the updated MySQL I library. So you're going to kind of have to blend this new library in with the old database video that you've been watching.